Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the next in the webinar series of the Spine Wellness and Care Foundation and the Spinal Foundation webinars. Today we have a webinar on a very important topic, that is child car seat restraints. And we are privileged to have some very distinguished panelists in the field from across the globe who will help us share knowledge in this regard with all concerned. So welcome once again. Just some housekeeping announcements. We will be starting the webinar with a brief introduction and then a brief introduction about the panelists as well. And we will be posing some questions across to the panelists. At the end of the panel discussion, we will throw the house open for questions from anyone who would have any doubts about what has been discussed or would want to highlight something important pertaining to the topic. In between, if you have any questions, you could jot them down in the chat box and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We will request all those who are not speaking to keep their microphones of their devices on mute so that everybody can enjoy the webinar and focus on the proceedings of the webinar per se. So with that brief announcement, we will start with the proceedings of the webinar. We know that children are at risk for road traffic injuries for a number of reasons. Younger children are limited by their physical, cognitive, and social development, making them more vulnerable in road traffic than adults. Because of their small stature, it can be difficult for children to see surrounding traffic and for drivers and others to see them. In addition, if they are involved in a road traffic crash, their softer heads make them more susceptible to serious head injury than adults. Younger children may have difficulties interpreting various sights and sounds, which may impact on their judgment regarding the proximity, speed, and direction of moving vehicles. Younger children may also be impulsive, and their short attention spans mean that they struggle to cope with more than one challenge at a time. And in fact, roads are generally planned without sufficient consideration of the specific needs of children. Friends, These are observations of the World Health Organization per se. And as per WHO itself, globally around 186,300 children under 18 years die from road traffic crashes annually. Road traffic injuries are the leading killer of children aged 15 to 17 years worldwide. In addition, rates of road traffic death among children are 3 times higher in low and middle income countries than in high income countries. If you look at figures from India alone, you can see that less than 18 years of age, 11,168 children died in road traffic accidents in the country. These are official statistics from the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. In 2018, in Delhi alone, 117 children died in road crashes, while 560 got injured. And in fact, 29 children die on the Indian roads every day. As per WHO, road traffic injuries can be prevented. While no single measure adequately addresses the vast range of risks to children on the road, the 10 strategies have been outlined, which are best known to keep children safe on the road when implemented as a package especially. And amongst these 10 strategies, one of the important strategies is restraining children in vehicles. Let's look at how well this has been implemented and what is the compliance in India. As per this study from the Save Life Foundation in 2019, 75.7% parents are not aware of their vehicles requiring or having any child restraint systems. 3.5% of those who were aware had used child restraint systems at some point. In fact, 56% parents are not willing to pay for a child seat. These were the findings of this study, which also revealed that school buses hardly had any child restraints, which are so very useful in saving lives. So what could be the excuses for not using child car seat restraints? Is it ignorance, apathy, or habit? In fact, when it comes to children, it can only be ignorance. And thus, looking at the importance of creating awareness on this very important topic, we thought about having a webinar today so that we could create more awareness in this regard. And friends, we have a very distinguished panel which will discuss all aspects pertaining to child seat restraints today. Ms. Amanda Jackson, Regional Program Manager for the United States Department of Transportation's National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. She joined NHTSA in August 2021. Previously, she worked as a grant planner for the Georgia Governor's Office of Highway Safety in the areas of occupant protection. Amanda also served as the state's Child Passenger Safety Coordinator and is a Child Passenger Safety Technician Instructor. Amanda has a Master of Public Health in Health Behavior from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. She earned a Bachelor of Science in Health Promotion from the University of Georgia. Welcome to the webinar, Amanda Jackson. We also have Ms. Laura Dunn, who's a subject matter expert in child passenger safety and pediatric vehicular heat stroke in NHTSA's Office of Impaired Driving and Occupant Protection. Her role is to develop CPS programming at the national level in collaboration with government and non-profit agencies that share an interest in injury prevention, as well as manage agreements for the National CPS Board and the Child Passenger Safety Certification and Training Program. She serves on the National CPS Board as the NHTSA headquarters representative. Dunn holds a Bachelor of Science in Health Science, Public Health from Truman State University, and a Master of Public Health in Health Education and Behavioral Science degree from St. Louis University College of Public Health and Social Justice. Welcome, Laura Dunn, to this webinar. And of course, you may have met her before in one of our previous webinars on seatbelt use, Ms. Harrington, Director of Injury Prevention and Education Services, Shepherd Center, Atlanta, Georgia, in United States. Previously, Emma started the injury prevention program at Grady Memorial Hospital in the trauma department. She holds a Master's of Education degree in International Education Policy from Harvard University. Originally from Boston, Emma is a licensed social studies teacher. And of course, we thank Emma for having introduced Amanda and Laura to us for this webinar today. We also have Dr. Anil Shetty, Professor of Pediatrics, Father Muller Medical College and Hospital, Mangalore, Editor-in-Chief, Muller Journal of Medical Sciences and Research, Coordinator FMMC and NITK Suratkal Research MOU. And Dr. Anil Shetty has also done work in this regard and published in this regard. And that's why we requested him to be one of the panelists for the webinar today. And we are also privileged to have Pradyut Patra today, presently working as marine pilot at Dhamra Port, Odisha, India. He's a master mariner and has sailed across the globe on merchant ships during his 11 years of merchant navy career. His family met with a road accident on 8th May 2013, where his elder daughter, Siona, then aged 5 years, suffered a T3 level complete spinal cord injury. Siona's injury was managed conservatively and she was later rehabilitated. And we are happy to let you know that Siona is today studying in class 8 and attending school on wheelchair and living a fully functional life from the wheelchair. So welcome, Mr. Pradyut Patra, to the webinar today. So friends, we have this webinar today and we will be putting across some questions to the panelists. And the first question that we have is, what are the globally accepted guidelines for child car seat restraints? And may I request Ms. Amanda Jackson to first respond to this question. Over to you, Amanda.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for having us today. It's our pleasure to be here. And could you please go to slide 11, sir? If possible. To get started, we're going to go over the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's car seat recommendations. So a rear-facing car seat is the best seat for a child to use. Please use the rear-facing car seat until your child reaches the maximum height or weight allowed by the car seat manufacturer. Once your child outgrows the rear-facing car seat, your child is ready to use a forward-facing car seat with harness until he or she reaches the maximum height or weight limit. Once they outgrow the forward-facing car seat with harness, they then can transition to a booster seat. Please keep your child in a booster seat until they are big enough to wear a seatbelt properly. For a seatbelt to fit properly, the lap belt must lie snugly across the upper thighs and not stomach, and the shoulder belt should lie across the shoulder and chest and not the face or neck. And a child should stay in the back seat in the seatbelt because that is the safest part of the vehicle for them. I'm going to now turn it over to Laura Dunn, who will provide additional details on this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Laura, what do you have to add to this information?
So thank you. Good evening. So I wanted to answer the kind of fundamental question of what are the globally accepted guidelines related to child restraints. And the short answer is that there aren't really any. There are some regulations that the UN has regarding child restraints, but the specifics of that are very different from the United States, from Canada, and some even from the EU. So there's a lot of variability globally about design, performance, types of standards for child restraints. So I think that maybe someday we will get there with technology and vehicle design and child restraint design, but at the current time there aren't really any. So I'd love to just share a little bit about what we do at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and how we address child passenger safety. So we are an agency that is dedicated to promoting safe behavior on the United States roads and keeping the motoring public safe. So we work to prevent injuries and fatalities in children by developing educational tools for parents and caregivers, developing awareness campaigns about child passenger safety, conducting research of child restraints, research and testing of child restraints and of vehicles, setting regulatory standards. And that, when I say that, I mean our federal motor vehicle safety standards, most of which is governed for child restraints in the United States. That would be FMVSS 213. That is the one that kind of encapsulates our regulations about child restraints. We support the National Child Passenger Safety Certification Program. So those are our car seat technicians that are all over the country that provide hands-on assistance to parents and caregivers to help their children. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura and Emma. Can you share your experience of child car seat restraints in the US?
Yes, I'll piggyback on to what Laura was saying about our National Child Passenger Safety Certification Program that we have here. I've gone through it myself. It's a very intensive training. It takes a week to learn how to properly install car seats and to teach parents and caregivers how to install those car seats into their vehicles. It is quite honestly one of the most difficult courses I have ever taken in my life. Harder than statistics, harder than stats, all of it. But it is super useful and really an incredible program that we have here. So to date, there are over 30,000 what they call CPSTs, child passenger safety technicians in the United States. And there's more than 5,000 fitting stations where parents and caregivers can go to get that hands-on education to learn how to properly install their car seats correctly every time. So it's really a wonderful service and a program that we have here.
Thank you, Emma. And we have visited the NHTSA website and gained information vastly compiled by NHTSA and I think appropriately implemented with a high compliance rate in your country. And I think in India, we would benefit vastly from what you have been able to achieve in US. I will summarize some of this knowledge that we gathered from NHTSA and would want you to then comment on whether we've been able to get it appropriately or not. When it comes to recommendations for car seat restraints, NHTSA recommends that select a car seat based on your child's age and size. Choose a seat that fits in your vehicle and use it every time. Always refer to the specific car seat manufacturer's instructions and read the vehicle owner's manual on how to install the car seat using the seat belt or lower anchors and a tether if available. To maximize safety, keep your child in the car seat for as long as possible, as long as the child fits within the manufacturer's height and weight requirements. Keep your child in the back seat at least through age 12. When it comes to the types of car seats that can be used according to the age of the child, they could be rear-facing car seat, front-facing car seat, booster seat, or seat belts. For children, in fact, for infants, that is children less than 1 year of age, they should always ride in a rear-facing car seat as per the NHTSA guidelines. There are different types of rear-facing car seats. They are the infant-only seats which can only be used rear-facing. And there can be convertible and all-in-one car seats typically, which have higher height and weight limits for the rear-facing position. For children 1 to 3 years of age, keep the child rear-facing as long as possible. It's the best way to keep him or her safe. The child should remain in a rear-facing car seat until he or she reaches the top height or weight limit allowed by the car seats manufacturer. Once the child outgrows the rear-facing car seat, the child is ready to travel in a forward-facing car seat with a harness and tether. For children between 4 to 7 years of age, keep the child in a forward-facing car seat with a harness and tether until he or she reaches the top height or weight limit allowed by the car seats manufacturer. Once the child outgrows the forward-facing car seat with a harness, it's time to travel in a booster seat, but still in the back seat. For children 8 to 12 years of age, keep the child in a booster seat until he or she is big enough to fit in a seat belt properly. And how do we define that? For a seat belt to fit properly, the lap belt must lie snugly across the upper thighs and not the stomach. The shoulder belt should lie snug across the shoulder and chest and not cross the neck or face. A child ready to use an adult seat belt without the aid of a booster seat will be around 4 feet 9 inches tall. Remember, the child should still ride in the back seat because it is safer there. These have been the NHTSA's guidelines, and I believe the work in this regard started way back in 1968. And then it has been a long journey wherein you have moved forward, gradually consolidating on the knowledge, increasing on the guidelines, effectively legislating them and enforcing them in order to have child safety. And this long journey still continues. You continue to work towards child safety. And in fact, in 2019, there was the National Digital Car Seat Check Form, which was launched. And as Emma mentioned, there are 42,000 certified technicians. The National Child Passenger Safety Certificate Training Curriculum was updated also in 2019. So I don't know, but we will also learn from our panelists from India as to where India stands in this regard. Are we still where your journey began, or have we moved forward? I would only want to share some information that when we tried to compile an audio visual on spinal injury prevention for the International Spinal Cord Society, we had experts from across the globe which were contributing data in order to compile the script for the audio visual. And when it came to child car seat restraints, when we asked people from across the globe, as Laura had mentioned, unfortunately, there are no consensus guidelines across the globe. When is it that a child should switch from special car seat restraints to a seat belt? Is it age? Is it height? Or is it the fitness? Or are these the manufacturer guidelines? There are no consensus guidelines across the globe. A small clip from that ISCOS audiovisual.
Children less than 12 years generally should not be allowed to sit on the front seat and should be properly restrained in the back seat. Some countries recommend a limit of 8 years or a minimum height of 4 feet 9 inches or 1.44 meters. Children who have outgrown child safety seats should be properly secured in a booster seat until they are at least 8 years old.
So some countries, right, not all countries, right? And as was mentioned by our very prestigious panelists, we hope that there will be universal guidelines in this regard. We hope WHO or the UN or some agency takes note of this very important topic and helps compile international guidelines. So with this information, but before that, whatever I have summarized, do you have anything to comment on that, Amanda or Laura or Emma? Or have you been able to gather knowledge about the guidelines in your country appropriately? Amanda?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura?
Yeah, I would say that you did capture things appropriately, and it is such a challenging issue because the fit for car seats is really based on the size of children, and that's why guidelines are so variable, because children are so variable. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Emma, anything to add to that?
Nothing at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we move on, and let's now try to listen to our panelists from India on what is the status in India. Are the Indian guidelines for child car seat restraints different from globally accepted guidelines? If yes, why so? And to share more information in this regard, may I request Professor Anil Shetty to share his views.
Thank you, Dr. Chhabra. As the three panelists before me elaborated, there's a lot of regulations, enforcement and compliance in the US. Unfortunately, all three are absent in India. We had about, I think, 570,000 accidents a year, road traffic accidents, and there are about 150,000 fatalities in those 570,000 on the average, 572,000 accidents. About 30 children die every day in road traffic accidents in India. There are rules. There's a rule 125 of the Central Motor Vehicles Act, which mandates that people wear seatbelt in the front seat. And there is also a rule 138.3 of the Central Motor Vehicles Act, which mandates that passengers or commuters should wear seatbelts in the rear seat, which is rarely or never enforced. In fact, the probably the most discussed topic in India right now is the political situation in Maharashtra, which is probably in India's richest state. And 8 years ago, probably the person would have been the potential chief minister of Maharashtra, Gopinath Munde, on June 3rd, exactly 8 years ago, almost exactly 8 years ago, on June 3rd, 2014, met with an accident while he was traveling to his first official meeting. And unfortunately, apparently he was not wearing his seatbelt. So I think compliance, especially in wearing rear seatbelts, is very poor in India. And the same study Dr. Chhabra quoted, the Save Life Foundation study, so that among 6,606 respondents, only 7% use rear seatbelts. And in India, over 30% of the fatalities in road traffic accidents involve people not wearing seatbelts, rear seatbelts. But recently, the government has moved slightly from 2-point seats. It has made the 3-point seats mandatory. And from this year, earlier we had only the two side seats in the rear of the car that had seatbelts. But now it has made the center rear seat also, seatbelt on the center rear seat also mandatory. Now the government is planning a lot of things to improve the safety. Now it's mandatory for car manufacturers to provide 6 airbags. One might surprise a lot of people is most of the cars in India don't have airbags. We're not just talking about child seat restraint system. Even airbags, they don't even have airbags. But the government is thinking of making mandatory to provide 6 airbags in each car. And we have a plethora of gadgets like automatic electronic braking system, electronic stability control, driver drowsiness and assist warning systems, blind spot identification system, lane deviation warning systems. But safety is not a gadget. Safety is a state of mind. The Ministry of Road Transport and Highways in February 2022, that is recently, notified rules for children traveling on two-wheelers, nothing on cars so far, but on two-wheelers. And they made it mandatory that from October 2022, that children traveling on two-wheelers will have to wear crash helmets and also safety harnesses. And these safety harnesses, they also made rules on what those safety harnesses should be made out of. It's nylon, and that this material use should be durable. And India is a signatory of the Convention of the Rights of the Children, and there are various rights elaborated in that, including on education, health, but there are rights on commuting also. But unfortunately, we have not implemented anything. And it is not just while children traveling with their parents, even school bus vans. The same study showed that only 11% of school buses and vans that are used to ferry children had seat belts. And a study that was done in 11 Indian cities showed an abysmal figure or statistic for compliance in wearing seat belts, only less than 10% in most of the cases. And recently, about 8 years ago, the government made a provision to fit child assistance systems should be made mandatory, but unfortunately not strictly implemented. In 2014, the government proposed that all car manufacturers have provisions to allow the installation of child car seat restraint systems. And in 2015, various rules were proposed but were not implemented. Among all the states, I think Kerala is the strictest in implementing these rules. And also there is the ISOFIX seating system, that is the international standard for attachment points for child safety seats. This is the international standard that is used, and if I'm not mistaken, I think the system that is used in the US is the latch, the lower anchor and tethering system, and this ISOFIX system is similar to that. And this system was introduced, was suggested by the government, not actually introduced. And only two of the, maybe the 20-30 car manufacturers, only 2 of the car manufacturers in India have implemented this system. So this is the very sad state of both in terms of regulation, compliance, and enforcement in India.
Thank you, Professor Anil Shetty, for giving the overview of the situation in this regard in India. Pradyut, do you have anything to add in this regard?
Yeah, good evening all, and good morning to our friends in the US. Yes, Dr. Shetty has comprehensively covered what is the regulatory status in India. I'll just add to that the Motor Vehicle Act of India is dealing in these matters. And recently in 2019, the penalties were actually multi-fold increased. Before that, the penalties were just like peanuts, and it was not at all a deterrent. At least since 2019 revision of the Motor Vehicle Act, the penalties have increased for enforcement, and in many states of India, it is being strictly enforced. As per the Motor Vehicle Act section 194B, that the only section dealing with the car seat belt and the child restraint, there is a penalty provision of 1,000 rupees per default. But as Dr. Shetty has rightly pointed out, it is hardly enforced anywhere. We do started enforcing speed limitations, harsh driving, and alcohol consumed under the influence of drugs and alcohol. Those things are being looked into it, but this part like the seat belt and the child restraint system, nothing is actually it's not, awareness is lacking, and regulatory also there is no regulatory enforcement. Yes, regulation is certainly there, but it is not enforced. So first of all, the awareness need to be, sensitization of the large mass needs to be done. As Dr. Chhabra has introduced me in 2013, I had met with a road accident. My entire family was there in the car. And just I'm today in front of you just because I was wearing my seat belt. I was driving the car and I was wearing the seat belt, and that's the only thing which has saved me. And the impact was not that much that not the airbag also got infected. My car had 2 airbags in the front. It was a Toyota Corolla Altis, which had 2 airbags that time, those days in the front. My wife was sitting on the co-passenger seat. She was also wearing the seat belt, and she's alive today because of that only. Otherwise, would have. But my daughter was on the back seat, but she was not wearing seat belt. She was small 5-year-old, and she was in lap of my aunt, and she was also not wearing the seat belt on the back seat. That's why both of them slipped and got stuck between the back seat and the front car handrest. And that's how the injury. They are the 2 persons who got injured, and they were not having the seat belts. Since we had the seat belts, we are lucky to survive, and my daughter had suffered from spinal cord injury, and my aunt had a hip bone fracture, which she has recovered. But I'm the witness what kind of safety seat belt provides. So we need to carry on this campaign in India with the full all kind of support from all organizations, so that the people can be sensitized. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradyut. If I remember correctly from what information we were able to gather, it was in fact in 1995 or 94, in fact, when the death of a young child due to lack of a special buckle to make front seat belt system hold car seats in place resulted in unprecedented publicity and drew national attention in US to the problems of child restraint motor vehicle compatibility. And that led the NHTSA to enforce and legislate further in this regard. And I think we have to learn from the fact that there can be still a large number of lives that can be saved, and a large number of injuries which can be prevented. And there is legislation in India, but its enforcement needs to be done so that we can prevent injuries per se. As Professor Shetty also mentioned, the government from October 2014 has made it mandatory for every car maker in India to equip its cars with provision for installing child seats. But we still need to see that come out openly. And as was also mentioned by him, for children below 4 years, safety harnesses should be used for attaching the child to the driver of the motorcycle. So for two-wheelers also, there's a legislation by the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways notification, but this needs to be enforced effectively. And this blog summarizes it all, that being a vast country with different culture, class, and income of people, there is less awareness about the child safety seats. And it's about time that the Indian vehicle safety guidelines, which include child restraint system, are aligned with international standards. It will result in slight escalation of cost, but the safety aspects are far more important. And I think whatever we have discussed till now is in line with what has been mentioned in this blog. Would you tend to agree, Professor Shetty and Pradyut?
Yes, definitely. I think I agree 100%, sir.
Right. So we come to our next topic of discussion. How good is compliance towards use of car seat restraints in the USA, and how successful has the implementation of the regulations been? And again, Amanda, could we request you to throw some light on this topic?
Of course. I will start off answering this question and then I will pass it over to Laura. But in 2020, of the 23,824 passenger vehicle occupants killed in fatal crashes, 755 or 3% were children 0 to 14 years old. Of these 755 child passenger vehicle occupants killed in fatal crashes, we knew the restraint use for 680. Of that 680, 286 or 42% were not restrained at the time of the crash. In 2019, the National Child Restraint Use Special Study reported nationally that 46% of car seats and booster seats are misused. If you look at the graph at the bottom, though, you can see in 2020 for children 0 to 8 years old that the use rate is 93.6%. So this is studying actual use, and then the statistic in the blue box is looking at correct use. We also provided a summary fact sheet for your review that I will include in the chat as well, that explains more on the National Child Restraint Use Special Study. Thank you. And I will turn it over to Laura.
Thank you, Amanda. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you. Well, Dr. Chhabra kind of alluded to this earlier when he was talking about the history of how child passenger safety was implemented and how our program grew in the United States. So if we could go to some of those history slides, please. Thank you. So in the beginning, there was not a lot in terms of equipment or awareness that this was an important issue. So, you know, actually the first child restraint was developed in 1968, one developed by Ford and one developed by General Motors. So in 1971, that was when we developed our first federal motor vehicle safety standard for child restraints. And the Action for Child Transportation Safety, founded for parent citizen advocates to promote child passenger safety. So I think the important takeaway for this, and even when we get to 1978, when we talk about the implementation of the first child passenger safety law, which was in Tennessee, is that this very much started as a grassroots movement by parents, loved ones, and physicians who saw these devastating injuries and deaths to children. So that is really the impetus behind how all of this started in our country. Over the years, we collected more data. We had some observational surveys that took place. But the implementation of these laws throughout the country, because we have federal standards, but the laws regarding use for child restraints is different in each state. But because it concerns children, I think we were successful in implementing laws in every state in the United States. And that is true today. We have one state in the United States that does not have an adult seatbelt law, but they do have a child restraint law. So we are very fortunate in that regard. So over the years, we did more research. We evolved our standards. We worked with Safe Kids Worldwide to develop the first curriculum to train these child passenger safety technicians that Emma talked about earlier. And these are people, I am one myself, Emma is one, Amanda is one, all over the country that usually as part of their job or just volunteer time, provide that hands-on assistance to parents in order to help them install and use their seat correctly. It's one thing to buy a seat, it's another thing to use it and install it correctly. So that's what we aim to help people with. So we do that in person. We, especially during the time of COVID, we do virtual appointments with FaceTime or something of that nature to provide that assistance to people in a safe way. So we continue to do research into vehicles and child restraints to evolve our standards. We continue to update that curriculum with the best information possible and recruit more people to be trained. The latch system was something that evolved in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. So that is another safe option that parents can use to install their child restraints. We have the seatbelt system, the locking seatbelt system, as well as latch as an option for parents to install those seats. So, at this point, we continue to recruit new technicians. Something exciting that I would like to talk about in 2019 and in 2020, we launched the National Digital Car Seat Check Form. So it is a centralized place where technicians who do car seat checks with parents can enter in information about how that seat arrived and then how that seat left. And it really gives us a good real-time picture of how these seats are being misused. So we and other folk and injury prevention folks in states can really tailor our educational messages for those specific misuses. So that's exciting. And we're also now able to offer the certification training in a hybrid sense, in a hybrid way. So people do more e-learning at home. You have some virtual live instruction, and then the last day is kind of that hands-on practice. So we hope that we can recruit more people to become technicians with that. So that is kind of the story of child passenger safety in our country thus far. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Emma, would you want to add something to that?
I think Laura got it all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we have good information about lives saved by restraint use, seat belt, and frontal airbags. You can see how a large number of lives were saved in children up to 18 years of age across the US, and these are official statistics. And there have been figures again that 325 children under 5 years of age were saved by car seats in 1 year in the US, and 35% children killed in car crashes in 2018 were unrestrained, and 46% of car seats and booster seats are used incorrectly, as also mentioned by Amanda previously. But if you look at these figures compared to those in adults, the compliance is still low. I think our experts would agree with that. And they talked about the national CPS training and certification that is so very important. And we need to probably learn from their experience and implement it in India as well. And with that, we will pose this question to our panelists from India. How can we increase awareness and improve compliance for use of child car seat restraints in the Indian population, taking examples and inputs from the Western world per se? So I would request Professor Anil Shetty to first throw light on this area. Dr. Shetty, I think you're muted. Could you unmute yourself? Professor Shetty?
Yes. Okay. I think I'd like to summarize my recommendation under first education. I think I think there's not much awareness, especially in India. If there is probably some awareness was created, then a lot of people would want legislation and would comply also. And education, in the sense, educate people about child restraint systems in cars, about the different types, and then also the lives that are lost by not wearing seat belts, the lives that could be saved by wearing seat belt, and also research I think in the Indian context, there is very, very little research. I would publish study, and there is very little literature, either medical literature or even otherwise, on child safety in cars. I think we have more literature on the burden of school bags, heavy school bags in children than while that is important elsewhere, we have very little literature. I think a lot of research should be done. Second, the laws. I think laws should be act as a as an incentive and also as a deterrent. There should be some subsidies and some fines also, and there should be a shop, not just laws. We have, like Pradyut already mentioned, we have regulations, we have laws, but there is not much enforcement. So I would suggest that once those laws, the laws are tightened and more laws introduced, this short-term, high-visibility enforcement. That is, a campaign of, for a short period at least, stopping cars and then checking. Probably in places where there is a high congregation of parents and children, like in schools, parks, and maybe malls also, just to show that we mean business. It is not just laws, and that should be some high visibility enforcement also. Then mass communication and sensitization. It's similar to education, but probably we should involve parents, parent-teacher associations, schools, and professionals also, and communication by probably maybe a viral video, maybe a catchy tune on FM or some other forward, and that could be disseminated across social media about especially about the importance of all this. Then we should also involve influencers like pediatricians and school teachers. We pediatricians always advocate the virtue of vaccination, immunization. Probably we could do the same for child seats, and probably in our vaccination card, and our immunization records, we could include information so that when parents read those cards, they take it more seriously. And maybe schools could have programs in a child safety week, or probably they could conduct an audit at school to see how many parents would. That would really could create awareness among parents. And then Atmanirbhar, for our panelists from the US, Atmanirbhar is a central government program on self-reliance in manufacturing. Most of our child seats that are manufactured in India are from China, and the more expensive ones are from the West. Probably we'll have to incentivize manufacturers in India to produce and also to market, not just production, to market. Probably it'll be easier for an Indian manufacturer to do that. Then increased availability. Right now, child seats are available, for cars are available only in probably high-end stores and available online. Most of the child seats that are sold in India are through Amazon or Flipkart. Probably we should increase availability, not just in this high-end stores, but also probably in supermarkets. And supermarkets could have counters, and we could have viral video. Videos playing on a loop just about this products. Then, importantly, I think we should also involve car manufacturers, because involve car manufacturers and car dealers. Car dealers, actually push a lot of accessories. Actually, many of them are unwanted probably. When they can push those accessories, they can probably do something very useful, that is push these car sets at the car dealer. And that's why we should involve car manufacturers. And mostly, and last, a redistribution portal. India is a very price sensitive market. There is a price tag even for safety in India. And for a lot of people, the issue is that this may not be affordable. So probably especially in India, once children, after adolescent, when they grow up, those child seats are still lying there with the family, and those booster seats, those seats are not used. Probably we could create a redistribution portal for a second-hand market for child seats, just like how there's a second-hand market for cars.
Thank you, Professor Anil Shetty, for giving your views. I think these are very important and would help putting focus on this very important topic. We want to take Pradyut's views, and also Pradyut's views because the family has gone through a lived experience on what is the post-trauma management scenario and how could we also improve that? So could you throw some light on that, Pradyut?
Yeah, Dr. Shetty has covered quite all the points very nicely, and I have only few suggestions to add on to that. Like in India, we celebrate Road Traffic Safety Week every year in all industries and everywhere. So we can, and every year there is a theme. So we can propose to get this child restraint safety also one of the theme for one of the coming year, so that this gets some publicity and awareness is increased amongst all the car users. And of course, it is first stage is to know, people should know that the use is required, and the second stage will go to like what we have seen from US, that 46% even today, 46% incorrect use was the cause of some kind of injury. So that means it is not only important to have the car seat, but it is also very, very important to use it properly. So that's where the trainers and training program are there in US for the implementation. In that regard also, we need to work parallelly, so that not only we buy the restraints, we also use them properly.
Thanks, Pradyut. Would you also want to throw some light on the post-injury management scenario in the country, especially from the lived experience in your family?
Yes, Chhabra, we have in India, we have a large population, and we are the population is very much lacking in the knowledge of management of accidents, road traffic accidents. Previously we were not having very good roads. Now we are getting very good roads, and vehicles are speeding up, and of course when we are moving at a speed, we get more accidents, and the severity of the accidents are also high. And when it comes to that, there are a lot of people in India, the moment there is some incident, there will be a lot of helping hands, but they do not really know. They are emotionally involved, they want to help you, but they are not aware what is actually causing more damage to the person. When we had a car accident, a lot of people gathered there, and they just pulled us out of the car. The car is damaged, so probably when they pulled us out of the car, as we all know, that spine, in case of spine injury, is a secondary injury which is more fatal and more severe than the primary injury. So when I myself was not aware of what is this spinal cord injury at that time when I met with an accident. So everybody pulled us out. We went to a nearby health center, where doctor told us, okay, this child has got some internal injury. So he gave injections so that we can take her up to the higher center. At the same time, my aunt had hip bone fracture. So there was only one ambulance, and the ambulance had only one bed. So my aunt was made to lie down on the bed, and we are carrying our daughter on our lap, holding on her. Her mother was holding her in the hands. So throughout, we had to travel about 70 kilometers in that condition, and with the bumpy roads and all that. I guess her injury has got aggravated. So there is a protocol in Western countries. The moment there is a road traffic accident, irrespective of any, whether you know or you don't know, you have to strap the injured person, IP, onto a flat board. That spine board is there. You strap him, and then you take him to hospital or the next, and there only after scanning or there is a mandatory scanning, and after that you only do the appropriate treatment for that. That would save secondary injury to the spine, which is which is very, very important. So that awareness also need to be brought into every level. For me, in my case, I was rescued by the local villagers, the police, everybody was very, very supportive, but then nobody, including me, was aware of there is something called spinal cord injury, and there is a secondary injury which can be more harmful than the primary injury. So this thing also need to be sensitized to people, everybody, at least to the helping hands like the police and the doctor has also told us that okay, she has got an internal injury, but he has not never advised us to okay, strap her and take her because there was only one ambulance available. He said that you must reach to higher center as early as possible, and basically it is the ignorance and the lack of protocol. I guess it is the protocol in Western countries and developed countries that in case of any road traffic accident, the person need to be strapped on the board and then transported to the hospital. So we need to work on that also. That needs a lot of infrastructure, and India being a big country, pan-India implementation is definitely a challenge. But as we have seen that US is working on this particular aspect since 1968, and it's about 54 years now, and the compliance level is still not 100%. They're using 90% of the people are using it, but 46% are not using it correctly. So they also have a long way to go. We need to learn from their experience and speed up our implementation in India. Dr. Chhabra, I think you are muted.
Thank you, Pradyut. You have brought to light some very important aspects, and I think it is very important that we work in this area. And you also brought to light how pre-hospital care needs to be improved substantially in India. In fact, US also, we have some very good statistics from them, how in 1970s, when they threw more focus on pre-hospital care, in a decade, they were able to reduce the mortality and morbidity substantially, right, through proper implementation of pre-hospital care. So, in fact, if we were to focus on one area which would have the maximum impact on the outcome of spinal cord injury, it is pre-hospital care, which is very important. And we all know how important it is to the injury at the time of the impact, right? If it is an incomplete injury, most of them will recover substantially subsequently. And if it is a complete injury, many of them will stay paraplegic or tetraplegics for life. So the number of incomplete injuries were increased substantially, and complete injuries reduced substantially by good pre-hospital care in the US within 1 decade of implementation at that time. So the statistics say that very well. So I think we need to take a cue on that also in our country. And we need to learn from the experience of various campaigns and resources of NHTSA in US. There have been various campaigns that they have taken, and as a result of these campaigns, they have been able to create more awareness, right? Whether it's Buckle Up America, Click It or Trick It, the most successful seatbelt enforcement campaign ever. And I would only throw some more light. Professor Anil, Shetty and Pradyut have covered it substantially, but there is this publication which talks about ways to improve compliance of car seat restraints in India. And they mentioned that there needs to be proper guidance and awareness. And that's what we are trying to do today in this regard. They also talk about primary and secondary enforcement of the legislations in this regard. Professor Shetty talked about most of these child car safety seats being available mainly in e-retail. This has been growing very rapidly, but there's a need for this to be available more widely also as per this publication. They also talk about incentive and education programs, so reward parents or children who correctly use child car seat restraints and have educational programs like they have in US, print materials, videos, or other instructional aids per se. And they talk about combinations of education, enforcement, and technological solutions, right? There could be reminders of not having children on the front seat or special alarms in this regard. And India being a growing economy, the income level gradually increasing, India can afford to go in for this. In fact, it is not only affordability, it's a right for the people that this be legislated and enforced. And we not only have to talk about expenses, we have to talk about also cost effectiveness. We know what is the expense that the society, not only the family, bears for a single spinal injury. And it is far cheaper to prevent the injuries than to manage it. Let aside the devastation, not only physically, psychosocially, that everybody goes through with such injuries. So with this, we come to the last question that we will throw to the panelists. What recommendation do you have for parents and caregivers about child car seat safety? And let's have Professor Anil Shetty first respond to this. I think this would be quick bullet type recommendations which we would want our panelists to share so that we can use their knowledge to create more awareness and ultimately try to also create awareness about legislation and enforcement in this regard. Professor Anil Shetty.
Yeah, I had, Dr. Chhabra, thank you, Dr. Chhabra. I thought about a few recommendations, but something that Pradyut said stuck me very much. And I hadn't thought about that recommendation earlier, but I'm going to mention that as first. Training. Because from what I gathered from his experience, and it's very true. I don't think I'm a doctor. I've been practicing I'm a professor of pediatrics, but even I don't think I wouldn't know how to, manage an accident victim and how to manage spinal cord injury immediately. I think we need training, especially in India, especially for the first responders. That is probably one of the most important recommendations. And I think we should create awareness that only children above the age of 13 years should be, be sitting in the front seats, and everyone else should be sitting in the rear seats. That is one. And we should also create awareness that maybe there might be parents who are aware of child restraint systems and would use it. But what happens is that same seat, which is used probably for use for an infant or a toddler, could be used for older children also. So we should make sure that they're aware of there are different systems for infants, toddlers, and then booster seats and seat belts. Airbag inflation, that is one more recommendation. And now the government is planning to make airbags mandatory in India, especially 6 airbags. And then people will be under the presumption that because their cars have come with the airbags, that is safe. While it could be true for adults, unfortunately, it is probably more dangerous, especially because in India, children travel in the front seat on the laps of their parents, or sometimes even on the driver's lap. So I think we should create awareness that if especially for children, these airbags they open at a rate at 1/20th of a second at the speed of about 322 kilometers per hour, and at that speed, especially when a child is not buckled, then it could be fatal to that child. So a false sense of security is created by having airbags. And rear seat belts. In India, compliance is increasing for front seat belts, but not much for rear seat belts. I think it should create awareness about that. And like I said, make car manufacturers stakeholders, because stakeholders, by incentivizing them to sell more by probably reducing the GST if they're sold on that platform, and also be accountable by naming those companies which are not compliant. I think one more thing I would suggest is we have to create a lobbying group. We have to create a coalition of interest, a lobbying group of not only parents, teachers, professionals, and most importantly, children. I think probably children are probably could be the most effective and most powerful lobbying group. We have seen children now advocating for climate change, and what I notice is that has been more effective than what we adults have been doing. And I think making children, advocating personal safety, especially their personal safety, could be more could be more productive and more effective than just adults doing. I think we should involve children also. And then, like I said, involving manufacturers. And one more point I'd like to bring up, and especially I would like to get the views of our panelists from the net TCS and especially from the US, is the future when we have self-driving cars. We have talked about a lot about cars and this, and I mean, in the very soon we'll be having self-driving cars. What happens then? When we make legislation and amend legislations or regulations, do we take children into account? Are we doing that? And I think we should make it mandatory. And also, when children travel in this self-driving cars, are they allowed to travel in the self-driving? What is the age cutoff? At what age should they be allowed to travel in the self-driving cars? And if they're driving, who is responsible? I think those are the important points. And just to highlight one point, and Dr. Chhabra said, he said, even though it might sound that car seats are not that economical, it's cost effectiveness. I like to end by saying that safety is probably the cheapest and most effective insurance policy.
Thank you, Professor Anil Shetty. These were very important recommendations that you have put across. In fact, you talked about the training of first responders, and you are aware that the Indian government has come out with the Good Samaritan Act. And this is very important, in which to try to create confidence amongst the public that if they are able to help someone with injury, they will be in fact rewarded, because previously they were afraid of the medical legal aspects and that the police would harass them subsequently. And this Good Samaritan Act of the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways will go a long way in trying to remove that doubt from the public. But when you talked about lobbying, you'll be glad to know that we tried to mobilize around 11 national societies who have now tried to represent to the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways that it is good to have a Good Samaritan Act, but you need to train the first responders also, so that the potential for damage which is there, if they are not evacuated properly, that can be taken care of. So you have highlighted very important aspects, and it was lobbying by this group of around 11 societies that the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare accepted the proposal to have a workshop under their aegis with these various societies and other international societies on injury prevention program. And we came out with overarching and other recommendations which we put across to the ministry. And you all will be very happy to know that as a result of these overarching recommendations, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare is now in the process of compiling an injury prevention program with involving stakeholders from all across the country. And we are all looking eagerly forward for the implementation of this program. So you have very rightly mentioned the importance, and it's our responsibility as well of professionals, of all stakeholders, to help the policymakers in coming out with policies in the interest of the society per se. So thank you, Professor Anil Shetty. May I now request Amanda to throw some more light on her recommendations per se on how we can improve child safety. Amanda?
Yes. Transition to the next car seat too early. You can maximize your child's safety by keeping them in the appropriate seat in the appropriate direction until they outgrow it by height or weight according to the manufacturer. And remember, please don't forget the booster seat. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. So, Pradyut, having yourself been through this experience before, what recommendations would you have for parents and caregivers about child car seat safety?
Dr. Chhabra, I have only one line which you have already covered, that trust me, it is very, very, very economical to have the child car seat, which is costing in India about 6,000 to 10,000 rupees presently, then going through a spinal cord injury. Certainly it is, there is no comparison, you know, it's as Dr. Shetty said, it's a cheap insurance. Of course, yes, it is. And somebody who is buying a car and who is using a car and now using the petrol diesel rate of above 100 per liter, affording 6,000 or to 10,000 rupees is not a big deal at all. But yes, it is the awareness which we need to bring into the society.
Very rightly put, Pradyut. The dictum prevention is better than cure, or prevention is cure, applies perfectly for spinal cord injury. In fact, all injuries per se. So very rightly put. Laura, what would your recommendations be for parents and caregivers?
This is a question that we get all the time as technicians. And that question is, what is the best car seat? And I would like to stress to parents or caregivers that the right seat for your child is one that fits your child, meaning it's appropriate for their age or size. It fits your vehicle and you can install it, and one that you will use correctly every time. Don't get an overly complicated one. Get one that you know how to use and you'll use correctly every time.
Thank you. I think we have now Emma, who would also give her views on, in fact, her recommendations to parents and caregivers about child car safety.
My main recommendation revolves around the importance of modeling the safe driving behaviors you want your child to then implement as they grow. So as soon as that rear-facing car seat turns around, they're watching us and they're modeling their behaviors after what we do. So from the very get-go, modeling the importance of the seat belts, of the harness, of properly installing a car seat, I think will go a long way as we move to further generations.
Thank you, Emma. We will now take a few questions. So Komal has raised her hand. Komal, what's your question, or what is your comment or suggestion in this regard? Unmute yourself. Komal, are you able to unmute yourself? Could we, just a minute. Let me. So we'll come back to Komal. I think there are some issues in her being able to put her question. Yeah,
I'm there.
Right. So you had raised your hand, right?
Yeah. I just I'm requesting the moderator to allow Siona to speak for half a minute, please.
Sure. Is Siona there?
Yeah, she's there.
Fine.
Swati, get her on, please.
Yeah, just a minute. Let me request. Just hold on for a minute. We'll just ensure that Shona can be unmuted. I think as was the comment.
Yeah, Swati is going to get her on. So Swati has a phone right now. And she's on the call.
Good evening.
Okay, okay. Hi, Siona.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah, Shona, go ahead.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Bete. How are you doing? Swati, can we have your video on and can we have a look at Shona? Meanwhile, if there are any problems with us being able to listen to Shona, if there are any other burning questions, we will take them from any of you. Swati, can you hear us?
Yes, sir.
Would you want to add anything to what Pradyut has talked about?
I'm okay with it, sir. He has covered all the points.
Right, right. We wish Shona the best of luck, and we are sure that she will, under the able guidance of Pradyut and you, do very well in life, right? Hi, Shona, how are you?
I'm fine, sir.
So how are your studies going on?
They're going fine, sir.
Good. So we look forward to having you emerge as a big stalwart who would lead the campaign for child safety, not only across India, but across the globe, right? Child cars and road safety, right?
Yes, sir.
Great, great. Look forward to seeing you more often, right?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Once we get the video of this, the YouTube recording of this, then we'll share it with Siona's school, so that their school teachers and kids can take it up with their parents.
All you need to do is go on Facebook or on YouTube. It will be there. Just type about this webinar and you'll get the link. Of course, we will share it with all the participants, but it will be there on Facebook and it will be there on YouTube so that we can create more awareness about it, not only in Siona's school, but for children across India, children across globe, and for parents as well. So we have Khwaish who has put up the hand. Yes, Khwaish, what's your comment or question?
Yeah, it is actually Dr. Kohli. I'm using
Hello,
my granddaughter's laptop. So quite.
Welcome, Dr. Kohli.
It was very wonderful discussion, very informative. I have a query, particularly related to seat belts in adults.
Right.
They're very effective in preventing serious spine injuries, no doubt.
Right.
But is there some mechanism to protect the cervical spine in the head also?
Yeah. Emma, would you want to respond to that?
Not sure, Dr. Chhabra.
Right. Dr. Kohli, Professor Shetty, do you have anything to add to that? I think, Dr. Kohli, what is very important is that if you have a seat belt on, there are chances that the head may be unrestrained and you may have sometimes a whiplash injury, right? So I think head restraint in the car is very important in preventing that. Laura, do you have anything to add to that, or Amanda?
Yeah, I would just like to add that the head restraint is a critical component of that occupant protection system for adults in seatbelts, and the head support and the shell of the car seat serves that critical function for children that are in child restraints. In the United States, with the latch system, one component of that is the top tether that connects to a connector on the back of it anchors the seat to the vehicle more, and it can help prevent head movement by about 4 to 6 inches. So it helps to reduce the risk for head injury. So I think that's another note that's pertinent here as we talk about the brain and spinal cord.
Yeah, Dr. Kohli, you specifically talked about adult seat belts and safety in adults. And it's generally a combination of all safety systems, which is very important rather than one system per se. And that's why they call about the safe system approach, where they take it that errors will be there on part of those using the roads, but we have to create an environment such that they are maximally safe. And in that, other than seat belts, airbags and other vehicular safety systems are very important. And it's not only the frontal airbags now, even the lateral airbags and other. In fact, the Indian government has also made it mandatory for each car to have 6 airbags there in all vehicles per se. But as we talked about, enforcement is still to be there. So hope we've been able to respond to your question adequately, Dr. Kohli. Seat belts are very important, though sometimes you can have what we call as a seat belt injury also. But the incidence of injuries and the incidence of mortality is reduced substantially with the use of not only seat belts, but the other safety mechanisms which are there in modern day vehicles. Any other points that you would want to put across, Dr. Kohli?
That's okay. Yeah.
Thank you. So, any other points from any other questions from any of the participants? Or would the panelists want to make any last minute comments on the webinar? So, yeah, Komal, you wanted to bring something to... Yeah.
I just wanted to ask the panelists, if there is someone sitting at the back on the back seat and there's a child in the lap, will the adult seat belt take care of both of them?
So, Laura, would you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. So, unfortunately, what we have seen with those types of crashes is that if a child is on an adult's lap and the seat belt is across both of them, the belt will restrain them to the point of keeping them in the vehicle usually. But unfortunately, the restraining forces and the physics involved, the adult will crush the child. Is how that injury mechanism sometimes happens. And, you know, when we talk about restraining forces, generally it's the weight of something times the speed that you're going. And many times a child will not be able to remain on an adult's lap, even in the presence of a seatbelt. They will be ejected due to the force of that crash. So 2 different scenarios, none of which are what we want, but the guidance that we give is that there should be, for adults, just one seatbelt. Don't share seatbelts with people, and children should be in a child restraint if at all possible. It's better for them to be restrained in something than nothing at all.
Thank you, Laura.
Laura, Amanda, and Emma, and our friends, Komal herself is a consumer, and her family was traveling when they had this injury, and her mother got a spinal injury along with her. And Komal represents the Spine Foundation here, with whose collaboration we have been organizing the webinars, and with whose help we've been having the Hindi translation of the webinar in the chat box going there. So thanks, Komal. Any other questions? If none, and if there are no other points to be highlighted, we just move on. I would want to just summarize what has been discussed today. Children in India, in fact, children globally are exposed to the risk of road crashes, but we want to put more focus on this aspect in India because we feel that there is a lot of potential to save lives, and especially when it comes to children, it brings a lot of psychosocial impact on the family and everyone. We want our children safe. The fatality numbers are alarmingly increasing. Child restraining systems are about safety. Unfortunately, awareness and compliance is low in this regard. For implementation, we need to have legislation. We need to enforce it. Awareness needs to be created. That's what we are trying to do. And we need to make the child safety restraints available across to people. So the take-home message, friends, for all of us, that parents should be a good role model with a habit of buckling up, because we know that car seats, special child car restraint systems reduce the risk of death in car crashes by 54% for toddlers aged 1 to 4 years. Holding babies firmly, this was the question that Komal asked, but this is a very important take-home message. Holding babies firmly is not the same as putting them in child car restraint systems. Everyone who pulls your child, or whether the child is traveling with you, should use the correct safety seat or seat belt on every trip, every time. So friends, this webinar has been brought to you by Spine Wellness and Care Foundation. It's a charitable, non-governmental organization established for improving the wellness of people with spinal ailments in India. We reach and serve persons affected with spine-related ailments, medically and socially, to help them lead better lives. Our main objective is to provide medical rehabilitation, vocational, recreational, and social support for persons affected with spine and related ailments. You can reach us through various means, through the Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, through our website, or through our email per se. And of course, this webinar is also held in collaboration with the Spinal Foundation, which was set up in 2014 as a pan-India umbrella organization to partner all individuals and organizations which have been working regionally in the spinal cord injury space, inclusively or exclusively, with the motto of reaching out to all persons across India and help them live well with SCI. TSF partners with various organizations in most of its endeavors, as today with Spine Wellness and Care Foundation. You could connect with the Spinal Foundation through their website, or you may also reach them through their email, the Spinal Foundation India @gmail.com. The website address is www.thespinalfoundation.org. We want to especially acknowledge the Spine Foundation volunteers who have been responsible for the Hindi translation today in the chat box. Thanks Manisha Ranka from West Bengal, Madhuri Pature from Karnataka, and Priya Sharma from Madhya Pradesh. Thank you very much. Friends, it is in our hands to create a better world for all who live in it. Let's join hands to improve spine wellness and care, and to alleviate the burden of spine disease. Thank you all for joining this webinar today. I think Komal has one last comment, and the consumers always have the last word. Nothing for us without us. So Komal, what's your last word? What's your last comment or query?
Happy birthday, sir.
Oh, thank you, Komal. Thanks. Incidentally, I thought nothing better than trying to create awareness on my birthday today. So thanks for the wishes, Komal. And all of you have a great day from friends from US because your day starts now. And for friends in India, because our day is coming to an end. But let's take a pledge today that we'll do anything and everything that is required to increase safety of our young ones, to increase the safety of children, not only in India, not only in US, but across the globe. Jai Hind, have a great day, and let's take this pledge and continue to strive for it. Thank you all. Thank you for joining this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chhabra, for
Thank you.
arranging this
Thank you very much.
webinar, and happy birthday to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chhabra.
Thank
And have a great day and year, and have a very happy birthday.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, sir. Happy birthday to you.
If only you could rewind real life. If only you had a second chance. If only. It takes just one split second to injure your spinal cord. One split second that will change your life forever. One little mistake that you will regret for the rest of your life. Spinal cord injury has devastating effects on the physical, mental, social, sexual, and vocational lives of the injured. Yet, they still